What is going on, everybody? My name is Diamond, and I'm thrilled to kick off a fresh coaching series I call the Rocket League Skill Tree. The idea is straightforward. Together, we're growing our own Rocket League tree of expertise. We'll start by planting the seed, nurturing the roots, building a strong core, or trunk if you will, and then branching off into specific categories like offense and defense. Now, in today's episode, it's all about planting that seed. And to do that, we're establishing the right settings for the game before you dive into action. Ready to grow your game? Let's jump in. All right, so in this segment, I'm not going to do any special editing. It's going to be straight to the point. A lot of this is going to be personal preference, but I'm going to explain the pros and cons of certain settings in order to aid you for your selection process. Before that, though, you must select a car hitbox to main. There are 6 hitboxes as of making this video: the Breakout, Dominus, Hybrid, Merc, Octane, and Plank. As of late 2023, pro players tend to main the Octane hitbox, which includes obviously the Octane, the Fennec, and the Honda Civic, to name a few. All of the previously mentioned hitboxes have their advantages. For instance, the Merc is better at 50s, the Dominus, Breakout, and Plank are better at flicks, but the Octane hitbox is more well-rounded. It's a good balance between most mechanics, so therefore the meta remains loyal to the Octane hitbox. But as I mentioned throughout this video, most of these choices are going to be personal preference. If you're below Diamond, choose whatever car you think looks cool, add a topper, add an antenna, have fun playing this game. It's only until you begin to take the game more seriously that your customization choices become more influential when playing. So I recommend simple builds like, matte finish, no topper, no antenna, and, standard boost. Something that doesn't distract you. Something that will also give you that visual competitive advantage. All right, so moving on to settings. For the gameplay tab, we have a few settings worth discussing. Enabling cross-platform will allow you to play with or against players on different platforms. Example being playing with your friend on PlayStation while you play on PC. Next will be the client and server send rates, as well as the bandwidth limit. This depends on your internet connection. I recommend, if you're using an Ethernet connection, to put all of these on high. However, if you're on a wireless connection or you are having some trouble with your internet, you can try low to medium settings. Now moving on, we have the input buffer. I'm not going to go super in depth with this setting, but all you need to know is that most pros and players set this to CSTS, including myself. Feel free to experiment with STS in the default selection if your inputs don't feel the greatest. Now, for more information on this, Halfwaydead, also known as Rocket Science, has a great video explaining more on the matter. Link in the description. Now, everything else is self-explanatory. Adjust the rest to your liking or copy what I have on the screen. Moving on to camera, the camera tab is debatably the most important category here, aside from controls, which we will get into in just a bit. Camera settings in general are mostly personal preference, but I'm going to give you recommendations to start out. I will also include a link to a list of pro settings in the description for those who would like to compare their camera settings to their favorite pro. The number one thing you should change before playing is going to be, the camera shake and the field of view, FOV. So immediately disable camera shake since it serves as a distraction when playing the game. Field of view's default is set to somewhere around 90, and to be honest, that is not good at all. You have almost no situational awareness when playing at a low FOV like that. I recommend upping that to anything above 100. Personally, I set mine to 110 to maximize my awareness, but some players like to lower that to like 109, 108, or even 107, sacrificing a tiny percentage of their awareness for accuracy. Now, distance is secretly linked to the stiffness setting. We're going to skip the other settings for now and focus purely on what stiffness is. The description for stiffness given by Rocket League is controls how rigidly the camera follows your car. To understand this further, it's best to know the difference between max stiffness and minimum stiffness. By maxing out your stiffness at 1.00, you'll notice that the camera stays in a locked position behind your car. This is most apparent when in car cam. The benefit of maxing out your stiffness is accuracy, while the negatives are your sense of speed and awareness. While moving at supersonic speed, you'll notice that the camera won't really zoom out, which may make you feel slower than you really are. Some notable players that use 1.00 stiffness are Asabatos, known for popularizing the Zap Dash mechanic, and Flakes, known for his Road to SSL Without Mechanics series. Now, putting stiffness at 0 will benefit your awareness and your sense of speed, but tends to lower your accuracy tremendously. When you reach supersonic speed, you'll notice your camera zooms out significantly further than before. This may also make it more difficult to gauge the depth of the field. 0 stiffness is the least favorable amongst the pros. Professionals tend to put their stiffness in the middle ranges between 30 and 70. Not sure why that is. Honestly, it might be because the early pioneers of the game, like Squishy, recommended that stiffness from the beginning, and everyone just kind of copied and played along. This is personal preference, as I mentioned before. You can choose any range you want. Think about it as a scale where 1.00 is max accuracy and 0 is your speed and awareness. This is all up to how you want to balance your stats. Experiment, choose what feels best for you. Now that you understand stiffness, it's time to return to distance. I recommend 220 to 270 when playing on 0 to 0.50 stiffness. And from 0.50 to 1 stiffness, I recommend 270 to 320. Like I said, experiment with the different ranges, but any of those combinations will do just fine in a competitive environment. For the rest of the camera settings, I'm going to give recommendations, but you are not limited to these, just choose what you like. For height, I recommend 90 or 110. You can try testing out 80 or 120, but I will promise you'll have a better experience playing in between the 90 and 110 range. For the angle, I recommend -3, -4, or -5. My favorites being -3 and -4. Now for swivel speed, it doesn't matter a whole lot, it's just the speed at which your camera swivels around your car. Set this to whatever feels best for you. If you're using a controller, it'll be your right analog stick, and if you're using keyboard and mouse, you'll have to bind camera swivel left and right in the controls menu. Now last but not least, we have transition speed, which controls the amount of time when switching between car and ball cam. I personally have it set to 1.5 to help with the transition from first man to a role I call Shark, where you make an attempt to steal boost and demo or bump the opposing team. Controls. Depending on what input device you use will matter when changing settings in the Controls tab. If you are using a keyboard and mouse, skip this section. But now assuming you are using a gamepad controller, like a PS4, PS5, or Xbox controller, we will be talking about the sensitivity and dead zones, but not in depth. If you want a complete explanation of these settings, I will link another video by Halfwaydead in the description below. My recommendations for controller dead zone are going to be anything between 0.05 and 0.15. 0.05 dead zone allows for the fastest input registration without stick drift. Sometimes this is bad because it requires you to have surgeon-like thumbs, meaning you have to be more precise with your movements when you want to do like a perfect side flip, a perfect front flip, or a perfect flip cancel. I find it easier to consistently do what I intend when I raise my dead zone to something like 0.07, higher, anything higher than that. But the only downside to this is your speed at which your input will register. In competitive environments, when the pace is moving fast, you might have to play a more proactive playstyle rather than a reactive playstyle to compensate for the input delay, so to speak. Things to consider will be what setup you play on. If you're on console, for example, you're going to be limited to the response time of your TV or monitor, frames per second, and the input delay of your controller. This is an extreme disadvantage when playing competitively, so this is why you see nearly all pros use a PC setup. I keep mentioning Rocket Science or Halfwaydead, but he is definitely a YouTuber you want to watch. If you want to know more about the intricacies of Rocket League, again, his videos are going to be linked in the description below. Now, for dodge dead zone, I recommend anything past 0.50. If you notice yourself backflipping when doing a fast aerial, for example, try raising this. For steering and aerial sensitivity, I recommend keeping them both the same to help with consistency on the ground and in the air. If you're just starting out, play on 1.00 for both, and periodically increase this throughout your career. Just understand that the more you increase it, the harder it becomes to control. I personally find myself playing more consistently on a lower sense than a higher one, but First Killer is a good example of someone who uses a low sense, while AJ would be a good example of someone who uses a higher sense. Both players are significantly talented mechanically at this game, and honestly, if you were to choose the high sense route, I wouldn't recommend anything higher than 2.00, which is double the original sense. Binds. Now, this is another section that is all up to you. You choose whatever feels comfortable when playing. When changing your binds, the main thing to take into account is your ability to jump and boost at the same time. So ask yourself, is it comfortable to fat finger X and circle or A and B when jumping for a ball? If the answer is no, then I recommend changing your boost to another button like R1 or right bumper. Another recommendation is putting power slide and air roll on the same button. This allows for easier recoveries when landing. You'll most likely be air rolling to adjust your wheels to touch a surface. So holding power slide simultaneously will allow you to keep your momentum. Lastly, you must figure out which directional air roll you would like to main. Now ask yourself, is it more comfortable for you to diagonal right flip or diagonal left flip? Okay, if the answer is left, you are most likely an air roll left main. If the answer is right, most likely an air roll right main. Now, if it doesn't really matter, you can probably main both of them. Find both of them to, square or circle. The way you hold your controller as well doesn't matter. I've seen players play claw, one-handed, even with unorthodox controllers like the Guitar Hero controller. There's some videos of that in the description if you want to check those out. Now, for the interface tab, I primarily want to focus on the nameplate scale. By raising this, it will increase the size of your team and opponent's names when playing the game, ultimately increasing your player awareness on the pitch. I put mine at about 150%. Everything else here is self-explanatory. Adjust to your liking. Before we move on to video, let's enable performance summary under performance graphs. So video settings depends on your setup. On console, I know you're limited to just a few settings, while on PC you have more freedom. In general, you want to be playing in full screen mode with vertical sync disabled. You want this disabled since you could increase your input delay, which you do not want. Under basic settings, you want anti-aliasing off, render quality to high quality, and your frames per second to match your monitor's refresh rate. On PC, to ensure you are actually playing on your monitor's refresh rate, go to NVIDIA control panel, change resolution, then make sure the highest number is selected under refresh rate. Alternatively, you can type advanced display into the search bar in Windows and do the same. Back to Rocket League, we have the advanced settings. This depends on how good your PC is. Ideally, you want to make sure your FPS and minimum FPS are in the green for the best performance. Disabling all of these settings and selecting performance or high performance is the best if you're looking for a more competitive advantage. Otherwise, set these to whatever you want. For audio, I recommend 0 crowd and 0 ambient because for me personally, it is a bit distracting and annoying. Everything else is up to you. Last but not least, we have chat. If you get tilted very easily, I can't stress this enough, change all of these options to friends only. For voice chat, same thing. For quick chats, I recommend putting I got it on your left, on your right, and faking under the information team section. This allows you to notify your team for if you want to implement, kickoff strategies. If you make quick chat for teammates only, you can include even more informational chats like bumping, need boost, in position, and many others. Alright, so that just about wraps up this video. If you watched the whole thing all the way through, thank you so much. I actually really appreciate that. Today we planted the seed, and from here on out we'll be nurturing and learning new skills for our skill tree, video by video. Also, this is a reminder to check the description for links I referenced and to give my personal coaching page a visit if you're interested in a coaching session with me. That will be all. Thank you guys once more, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Show them your brilliance. Peace.